Today we are going to discuss the first poem for 12th grade students found in the textbook Flamingo. The title of the poem is My Mother at 66. It's authored by Kamla Das. Before we go into the details of the poem and before we try to understand the poem in detail, a few words about Kamla Das. Kamla Das was one of the greatest figures in Indian literature, to be precise, in Malayalam literature. Reflection of lonely heart is a common theme in her poems. If we were to talk about the present poem, this present poem, that is My Mother at 66, it revolves around the theme of advancing age and the fear of loss and separation. The poet looks at her old and feeble mother and is looking at her. She is afraid and she is pained and worried as she realizes that she is not going to see her mother for a long time. That means the end of her mother is very near. Like any other child, she is afraid and insecure at the thought of losing her mother. This poem portrays an agonizing experience. Now, with this viewpoint, let's understand this poem. Now, what happens in this poem? If you observe the whole poem and if you observe its grammatical structure, you will realize that it's a free verse. It's not a rhyme scheme poem. It's not a poem that has got a regular rhyme scheme. It's free verse. It's punctuated by commas, and you will find only one full stop at the end. So it's a single sentence. The whole poem is a single sentence. So it is to say that a thread of thought continues to flow till the last line of the poem. So it reflects, or it gives us only one single thought. Then what happens? The poet is once traveling in a car, and she happens to be sitting beside her mother, and all of a sudden she looks at her mother and notices that she has become too old. She is appearing very old and feeble and weak, and all of a sudden she is afraid that her end might be very near. She is very old, so she may not survive for long, and like any other child, she begins to think what will happen after she would lose her mother. But again, she tries to bring some positivity in her. The poet, remembers how as a child she was afraid of losing her mother. So the same thought that she used to have as a child is again flashing back. Let's try to understand the poem word by word, line by line, to have a better understanding. Driving from my parents' home to Cochin last Friday. So the very first line of the poem starts like this: driving from my parents' home to Cochin last Friday. So she happens to remember the incident that took place last Friday when she was driving from her parents' home to Cochin. Now what happened at that time? I saw my mother. What was the time? In the morning time. I saw my mother beside me. Who was sitting beside the poet? Her own mother was sitting beside the poet. And how did she appear to be? How did the mother of the poet look? Dozed, open-mouthed. She appeared to be sleeping. She appeared to be very dull, partially asleep, and open-mouthed. Her mouth was open, her face ashen like that of a corpse. Her face ashen means again pale, dull, like that of a corpse. So the poet compares her appearance to a dead body. So she looked like a dead body, very dull, inactive. She appeared to have no energy at all, and realized with pain. That means the poet realized with pain that she was as old as she looked. That means her mother looked too old. She looked as old as she really was. But put that thought away. But again, the poet does not want to entertain this thought. The poet does not want to continue to think these negative thoughts. So she tries to put away these thoughts. And in order to put away these thoughts, what does she do? She looked out at young trees sprinting and merry children spilling out of their homes. So there are two images used by the poet. Once she looks at her mother, who appears to be very old, but she wants to get rid of this thought and she wants to bring some positivity. So for this, she looks at the young trees sprinting. Actually, it's not the trees that are sprinting, but actually the car is running. So the trees appear to be sprinting, the trees appear to be running. So trees are, it's a symbolic expression for greenery, for life. And again, the married children are young, they're active, they're agile. So children also, they're used as a symbolic expression for being active. So these are the two images or two symbols used by the poet in order to help her put aside the thought of losing her mother and bringing some positivity. So spilling out of their homes, but after the airport's security check. So now they have reached the airport and the security check has been over. Now after the security check, the formality at the airport, standing a few yards away, that means now the poet and her mother are standing a few yards away from each other. I looked again at her, that means the poet looks again at her mother. She appeared to be wan, pale. Wan and pale has got the same meaning, looking dull, inactive, pale. So she looked wan, pale as a late winter's moon. Now again here there is another symbol used by the poet, late winter's moon. It's a symbolic expression for decay. So here another image is used by the poet. So as a late winter's moon, she looked as, looked again at her. She appeared to be very wan and pale like late winter's moon, and felt that old familiar ache. Now again, the poet was reminded of something, that old pain, that old familiar ache. What was that ache? My childhood's fear. That means the same fear she used to suffer from when she was a child. Now what was that fear? The thought of losing her mother. So once she used to think these thoughts when she was a kid, she was a child, but again that childhood fear has flashed back in the minds of the poet. But all I said was, see you soon. The poet does not again want to entertain this thought of losing her mother, and she tries again to bring some positivity in her mind, and she says, see you soon, Amma. And all I did was smile and smile and smile. So here comes the end of the poet. So that means, let me repeat it once again for you. This poem revolves around the theme of, or the fear of, death and separation and loss. How the poet was traveling, the mother was sitting beside her, and how this thought of losing her mother is haunting the poet again and again, time and again. But she tries to put away these thoughts and she tries to bring some positivity in her mind by looking at the young trees sprinting, the merry children coming out, and again at the end she has this positivity with which she could say, see you soon, Amma. Now let's discuss the figures of speech used in this poem. Now as I said that it's not a rhyme scheme poem, it's a free verse. It's a single sentence punctuated by commas. So there is no question of rhyme scheme. Now, other than that, what are the things used? This poem has got examples of simile. See, face ashen like that of a corpse. What is a simile? Simile is a figure of speech in which two things are compared using the words like or as. So you see, like that of a corpse. So here is an example of simile. Again, pale as a late winter's moon. So here also is an example of simile. Then we also have an example of personification. What's personification? Personification is a figure of speech in which an inanimate object is spoken as though it were a person. So see, young trees sprinting, the poet has used this expression. So actually it's not the trees that were sprinting. The trees cannot run, they cannot sprint. but the trees are spoken as though they were, person, as though a tree were a person. So here is an example of personification. We also have repetition like smile and smile and smile. Then we also have examples of images, as I said, trees sprinting and merry children. They are used as symbolic expression for youth, activity, life, growth, or in other words we can say that vigor and vitality. Examples, they are examples of vigor and vitality, zeal, enthusiasm, and so on. And again, the winter's moon is a symbolic expression for decay or some negative things. So other than this, besides these, there are other poetic devices also, but these are the main ones. That is why I have pointed out. Let me know in the comment section if you have further questions from this poem, and remember to subscribe to my channel if you like the video, and don't forget to press the bell icon so that you don't miss any of my future uploads. Thanks for watching.